Hello, I'm Achut Nair from Nair's Aviation Ground School. This is the 29th video in a new series of educational aviation videos for the aspiring pilot. When driving on a road, we are stuck on the ground. We follow the road wherever it goes, up high mountain passes and through low valleys. The concept of height does not play a major role in our driving activities, but in aviation, height is everything. This video is about altitudes. As a general definition, altitude is a distance measurement, usually in the vertical or up direction, between a reference datum and a point or object. The reference datum often also varies according to the context. Although the term altitude is commonly used to mean the height above sea level of a location, in aviation, the term altitude can have several meanings. In aviation, the term altitude is always qualified by explicitly adding a modifier or adjective, or implicitly through the context of the communication. Parties exchanging altitude information must be clear which definition is being used. Aviation altitude is measured using either mean sea level, MSL, or local ground level or above ground level or AGL as a reference datum. Pressure altitude divided by 100 feet or 30 meters is the flight level and is used above the transition altitude, 18,000 feet or 5,500 meters in the US, but may be as low as 3,000 feet or 910 meters in other jurisdictions. So when the altimeter reads 18,000 feet, on the standard pressure setting, the aircraft is set to be at flight level 180. When flying at a flight level, the altimeter is always set to the standard pressure, which is 29.92 inches of mercury. On the flight deck, the definitive instrument for measuring altitude is the pressure altimeter, which is an aneroid barometer with a front face indicating distance in feet or meters instead of atmospheric pressure. There are several types of aviation altitudes. The indicated altitude is the reading on the altimeter when it is set to the local barometric pressure at mean sea level. The absolute altitude is the height of the aircraft above the terrain over which it is flying. It can be measured using a radar altimeter, also referred to as radar height or the feet per meters above ground level or AGL. True altitude is the actual elevation above mean sea level. It is indicated altitude corrected for non-standard pressure and temperatures. Height is the elevation above a ground reference point, commonly the terrain elevation. Pressure altitude is the elevation above a standard datum air pressure plane, typically 1013.25 millibars or 29.92 inches of mercury. Pressure altitude is used to indicate flight level, which is the standard for altitude reporting in the US. Pressure altitude and indicated altitude are the same when the altimeter setting is 29.92 inches of mercury or 1013.25 millibars. Density altitude is the altitude corrected for non-standard atmospheric conditions. Aircraft performance depends on density altitude, which is affected by barometric pressure, humidity, and temperature. On a very hot day, density altitude at an airport, especially one at high elevation, may be so high as to preclude the takeoff, particularly for helicopters or heavily loaded aircraft. These types of altitude can be explained more simply as various ways of measuring the altitude. The indicated altitude is the altitude shown on the altimeter. The absolute altitude is altitude in terms of the distance above the ground directly below. True altitude is the altitude in terms of elevation above sea level. Height is the altitude in terms of the distance above a certain point. Pressure altitude is the air pressure in terms of altitude in the International Standard Atmosphere. Density altitude is the density of the air in terms of altitude in the International Standard Atmosphere in the air. The altitude affects the pressure and temperature encountered by the pilot. Regions on the Earth's surface or in its atmosphere that are high above the mean sea level are referred to as high altitude. High altitude is sometimes defined as beginning at 2,400 meters or 8,000 feet above sea level. At high altitude, atmospheric pressure is lower than that at sea level. This is due to two competing physical effects: gravity, which causes the air to be as close to the ground as possible, and the heat content of the air, which causes the molecules to bounce off each other and expand. As an average, the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, defines the International Standard Atmosphere, ISA, with a temperature lapse rate of 6.49 degrees centigrade per kilometer, or 3.56 degrees Fahrenheit per thousand feet. The actual lapse rate can vary by altitude and by location, but basically what this means is, as we climb, the temperature will go down. Understanding the altitude of the aircraft is very important in situational awareness for the pilot. Knowing where in the sky we are operating allows us to ensure that we are separated from other traffic and that the flight can continue without any issues. Also, being familiar with the effects of altitude on the performance of the aircraft is important in predicting the aircraft's ability to fly and the different phases of a flight. For more information, please contact us at liftanddrag@gmail.com and visit our website at nyersaviation.webnode.com. Thank you, safe flying.